where we took your questions about this pandemic and the economic downturn to the White House and a panel of experts. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have the time to get your questions, all of them in, so I want to bring back another one of our panelists in just a moment. But first, we did give your questions to the White House, and we did get some replies. In fact, a senior administration official questioned about using PPP to pay for things like rent in places like New York and New Jersey where such costs are very high. Their response, folks, is that the terms are 75% for payroll, 25% for overhead, that the whole point of this was to keep employees on the job or on payroll, period. I mean, they're saying people first, so nothing there for rents. When I did ask about the length of the program, I was told, of course, that 8 weeks takes us to the end of May. They said they don't want to de-incentivize work after that point when presumably the economy, or at least some parts of it, are open. So 8 weeks it is for now. I still wonder both those things could be adjusted. Now let's get to some of your other questions. One from Valerie H. That did make the air, but Larry Kudlow didn't necessarily have the answer. Let's take a listen once again.
Hello. In order to meet the requirements for loan forgiveness through the SBA, must I pay my employees for consecutive weeks? The funding is obviously going to take longer than expected, and we are having difficulty continuing to pay our employees without it. Can we stop and then start up again once we receive the funding? We've already paid them for 2 weeks since we had to close.
So the administration official told me that these funds flow forward for 8 weeks from the date of disbursement. So whenever a business gets the funds, they will flow for 2 months. A business is not required to pay employees retroactively, although they may choose to do so. So what about hourly employees versus salary? We did get a question on that from several folks, including Carrie L.
Hi, Charles. I'm Carrie from New York, and I run an educational consulting firm and support clinic. Our income stream shut down almost immediately when the school systems closed. How do I take advantage of the payroll protection and loan forgiveness programs when half my staff is hourly employees and not salaried? I would like to hire them back to qualify, but I don't have the hours of work for them to do.
So we're told if these employees are W-2 income folks, the employer can take their March to June 2019 payroll to their lender and get their loan based on that. It's also similar to seasonal businesses. Now, if the employees are independent contractors paid via 1099, they can get these loans themselves directly. Again, this is from the administration. And finally, a question about college students. Let's take a listen.
Most universities have decided online classes for the rest of the year. Most international students, out-of-state students, and out-of-county students rented apartments near universities at a premium price and signed a contract for 1 year. Most of them have gone back to live with parents, but they are unable to cancel their rental contracts. I feel students should be given the choice to cancel their rental contract. So my question is, what can be done to relieve this burden? Thank you.
Folks, many of you are going to be crestfallen, but the response I got from the administration is that the CARE Act has no provision for this college student stuff, that 16, 18, 19-year-old stuff. It's just not in there, period. I do want to bring back in for some of these other questions, small business expert Gene Marks, to try to get more of these answers. Gene, by the way, thank you very much. You were fantastic on Thursday. Let's pick it up now. Thanks, because Chuck W. wants to know about capital gains. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Charles. Chuck Ronsky here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I have a question. I have a rental property that I'm going to have to pay capital gains on very soon. And I was wondering if there's any consideration the federal government will have to extend my time to sell my house before I have to pay any capital gains.
Gene, your thoughts?
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is not going to be a good answer. No, none of those provisions are included in the CARES Act. In fact, Charles, like you said earlier, the CARES Act is there to sustain and maintain employers so they can keep their people employed and hopefully cover some of their additional costs like rent and utilities. But it does not provide any provisions for people that have capital gains or even loss of income, particularly if you're a property owner. So unfortunately, the answer to that is no.
Yeah, Gene, I just got a great question today, or a suggestion. Someone said we should give seniors a tax break on capital gains. It remains to be seen. The administration's pretty steadfast in the way they've created it so far. I do want to ask you about credit card rates. We've got a question from Joan H. Let's take a listen.
Banks and financial institutions are able to borrow money at almost zero right now, yet they are charging their credit card customers up to 27% interest to get a cash advance. People who would normally pay off those cards each month may have to live on them for a while. Do you think President Trump or Congress could pass a law banning these high interest rates, or possibly put a moratorium on them for a while to help people out?
So, Gene, I'm not going to ask you to opine on what the administration may or may not do, but can you help us go over these laws? Because there is a lot of confusion out there when it comes to these rates.
Yeah, I mean, the interest rates themselves, there are certain caps for usury rates, but there are, credit card companies are still allowed to charge that amount. A lot of online lenders that are out there are also allowed to charge higher rates. Some small businesses are paying, believe it or not, Charles, 40 to 50% interest rates with some online lenders, and that's considered to be legal right now. So it's a matter that, of course, the Senate Finance Committee and the House committees also has to take up. I don't know how high it is on their priority list right now. All I can say right now is that if you're running a business or if you're an individual and you've got those credit cards, you really need to try and find some other type of financing that's a lower rate. The Paycheck Protection Program, the economic injury disaster loans, those are lower rate vehicles that can hopefully pay your expenses at a much more affordable level.
Yeah, 1% versus 50% is a pretty easy choice there if you can get it. I want to go to Dee. In Illinois. Let's take a listen, Gene.
I'm a small business owner in New Lenox, Illinois, and I have applied for both the EIDL prior to April 3rd and the PPP on April 8th. Can I apply for both loans and then decide which one works best for my situation? I have been told yes and no from different sources.
Gene, a lot of people are in this sort of quandary.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to tell you, yes, you should be applying for both, and I think that you should be accepting both. The rules really are that you can't use the funds of one loan to fund another. So, for example, the economic injury disaster loan, if you get funds under that, you can't use it to pay for your payroll and then go to Paycheck Protection. It has to be forgiven for those amounts. Having said that, Charles, the economic injury disaster loan, it's 30 years at a very low rate, like 3.75%. I mean, depending on what you think is going to happen to the economy, whether interest and inflation is going to go up, having a fixed rate at that level 2 or 3 years from now might look like a genius move. So I would say go for both of those loans, and if you get them, take advantage of them. Just don't double dip. Keep the funds. Do not commingle the funds. Use them for separate purposes.
Gene, I want to share my story. So we filed last week, my company. We've been doing business with Citibank for about 30 years. I've run tens of millions of dollars through there. But they pawned off our application to a small bank. I think they've got 2 branches. This bank has no clue what they should be doing. They're taking their cues from Citibank. I had to send them, and last night I had to email them my driver's license. It just feels, I'm sharing the frustration of our audience. I see why people are sort of banging their head against the wall. What do you say to folks like that?
Oh, Charles, you're making me angry just by telling me that story, because I've heard that story again and again, particularly from businesses that run substantial numbers through their banks. The big banks, guys, they're dropping the ball. For years, we have heard them talk about how important small businesses are to them. And now I hear story after story about banks, the larger ones, giving their smaller customers the runaround, not accepting, loans unless you're an existing customer or sign on for a credit card as well. This is such an opportunity for big banks to get to know small businesses and grow their banking practice. But maybe this whole program is just not profitable enough for them. They're very low interest loans with a lot of paperwork, a lot of questions. My advice, if you're a business owner, Charles, you should be looking at a smaller community bank. And I got news for you. Some of the online lending platforms, Kabbage, PayPal, Lendio, Intuit, that makes QuickBooks, they're now all up and running and accepting applications for PPP loans. And I got news for you. Those guys are more structured to take those loans. Right. They have the infrastructure and the technology to do it. I'm telling my clients, stay away from the big banks. I'm not sure they really care about you. Go to those online lenders or find a good community banker to work with.
Gene Marks, always appreciate it. Great stuff, my friend. See you again real soon. In the meantime, Cheryl Casoni has been monitoring this press conference headed up by Governor Cuomo of New York and other Northeast governors. Cheryl.
Yeah, you're looking at those live pictures, Charles, and the press conference is still going on. But a really interesting nugget here. We know the governors had already had several conversations before today. The governor of Rhode Island, Governor Raimondo, made a very interesting comment here about saying, look, we have a team. I've assembled a team already. Each state is going to do that. But what the governor of Rhode Island said is how we screen people to enter back into business is something that we're looking at. So they're talking about, the governor of Rhode Island, about screenings. Maybe you do it industry by industry. That is one thing. Also, the governor of New Jersey had mentioned that, the governor Phil Murphy, that, that they were watching the flattening of the curve. There was some maybe positive data. At the same time as this press conference is going on, Charles, then the New Jersey Health Department comes out and says that for today, 93 deaths were recorded between yesterday and today. 93 deaths versus 168 the day prior. So if you're looking for a decrease in a death rate, especially in a large state like New Jersey, Charles, that was some good news coming out of this. I wanted to share that with you and your viewers.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That is amazing news, the kind of things we've been praying for. Meanwhile, folks, stocks are retreating, but this after the best week for the S&P since 1974. And off the lows earlier today from comments from Governor Andrew Cuomo, the market has bounced around. So far, it's followed the technical textbook to a T. So now what are the textbook signals saying? Should you be buying? And President Trump is promising to make a decision on reopening states shortly. Again, we ask, what is the magic formula to restarting this economy? I'm going to be asking White House Task Force insider David Webb later in the hour.
Pete Talbot here again, along with